In 1979, Woolworth's was the largest store chain on Earth. Then, Walmart arrived. In 18 years, it was over. This is how the company that invented modern retail was destroyed by the company that learned everything from it. Frank Winfield Woolworth was born in 1852 on a farm in upstate New York. He had no money, no connections, and no particular advantage beyond a single observation that would eventually change the way the entire world shopped. Everything in a store costs different amounts. The customer has to ask the price of everything. The clerk has to negotiate every transaction. The whole experience is inefficient, slightly awkward, and weighted in favor of the seller. What if everything cost the same? In 1879, Woolworth opened his first store in Utica, New York. Everything sold for 5 cents. No haggling, no asking, no uncertainty. You walked in, you picked up what you wanted, you paid a nickel. The Utica store failed within 3 months. The merchandise was too limited. The location was wrong. Woolworth moved to Lancaster, Pennsylvania, and tried again. This time, he raised the ceiling to 10 cents, a nickel or a dime for everything in the store. The 5 and dime was born. Lancaster worked. Within a decade, Woolworth had 21 stores. Within 2 decades, he had hundreds. By 1904, there were 120 stores in 21 states. Woolworth understood something that sounds obvious now, but was revolutionary in 1880. The customer should be in control of the transaction. Walk in, browse, choose, pay. No performance required, no negotiation, no status game between a clerk who knew the real price and a customer who didn't. He also understood scale in a way that no American retailer had before him. The more stores you have, the more buying power you have. The more buying power you have, the lower your costs. The lower your costs, the lower your prices. The lower your prices, the more customers you attract. More customers means more stores. The cycle reinforces itself indefinitely. This is the logic that eventually powered Walmart. Frank Woolworth figured it out in 1879. By 1913, he built his headquarters in Lower Manhattan. The Woolworth Building, 57 stories, 792 feet tall, was the tallest building on Earth for 17 years. He paid for it in cash. $13 million. He wrote a check. By the 1930s, Woolworth's was as American as anything in the country. Every main street, every small town, the lunch counter where you got a grilled cheese and a Coke for 30 cents, the toy aisle where a child could spend an entire allowance and walk out with something real, the goldfish tank, the budgies in the pet section, the smell of popcorn from the machine near the door, the soda fountain, the bins of loose candy sold by the pound. Woolworth's wasn't just a store, it was a public space. It was where America shopped before shopping became entertainment, before malls became destinations, before retail became an experience. It was simply where you went when you needed something, and often when you didn't. At its peak, Woolworth's had more than 8,000 stores globally. By 1979, on its 100th anniversary, the Guinness Book of World Records certified it as the largest department store chain on Earth. And then something happened at a lunch counter in North Carolina that would define Woolworth's legacy more than any store it ever opened. On February 1, 1960, 4 black college students, Ezell Blair Jr., David Richmond, Franklin McCain, and Joseph McNeil, walked into the Woolworths in downtown Greensboro, North Carolina. They bought a few small items. They sat down at the lunch counter. The lunch counter was whites only. They asked for service. They were refused. They stayed in their seats. The next day, more students came. Within a week, hundreds. By February 5th, nearly 300 students had joined the sit-in, paralyzing the counter and drawing national television coverage. The movement spread. Within months, sit-ins were happening in 55 cities in 13 states. Woolworth's desegregated its Greensboro lunch counter on July 25, 1960. The original lunch counter from that Greensboro store is now on display at the Smithsonian's National Museum of American History in Washington. It is one of the most significant objects in the museum. Woolworth's had 8,000 stores. Its most important square footage was 66 stools at a lunch counter in North Carolina. But the civil rights moment is not where the business story ends. It is where the business story begins to diverge from the cultural story. The lunch counter is now in the Smithsonian. The business was already dying. While 4 students were changing America at that lunch counter in 1960, the executives running Woolworths were making decisions that would take 37 years to fully play out, but were already pointing toward the same ending. Through the 1960s and 1970s, the retail landscape that Frank Woolworth had invented was being reinvented around his company. Kmart arrived, Target arrived, and then, most consequentially, Walmart arrived. Sam Walton had read Frank Woolworth's playbook carefully. Everything Woolworth pioneered, fixed prices, scale purchasing, cost efficiency passed to the customer, Walmart executed more aggressively in larger stores with better supply chains at lower price points. Walmart was Woolworth's idea taken to its logical extreme. Woolworth responded by trying to become something different. They launched Woolco, a large-format discount store meant to compete directly with Kmart. Woolco failed. By 1983, all 336 American Woolco stores were shuttered. Some of them were sold to a growing chain called Walmart. The irony is almost too precise to believe. Woolworth's discount stores were literally absorbed by the company that had learned everything it knew from Woolworth's. Through the 1980s, Woolworths pivoted to specialty stores. Foot Locker, which they had quietly acquired in 1974, was performing well. Champs Sports, Lady Foot Locker, Kids Foot Locker. The company began to understand that its future was in athletic footwear and specialty retail, not general merchandise. But the original stores, the five and dimes on Main Street, the lunch counters, the toy aisles, the goldfish tanks, were dying. The economics that had made them work for 100 years no longer worked. The customers had moved to the suburbs. The suburbs had malls. The malls had Kmart and Target, and soon Walmart. There was no longer a reason to go to a Woolworth's five and dime when you could get everything it sold and more, cheaper, in one trip to a big box store. On March 17, 1997, Walmart replaced Woolworths as a component of the Dow Jones Industrial Average. The symbolism was almost surgical. The same year, Woolworths closed every remaining five and dime store in America. 118 years of the 5 and 10. Gone. The company renamed itself Venator. Then, in 2001, it renamed itself again. Foot Locker, Inc. Today, Foot Locker has over 3,000 stores in the United States, Canada, Europe, Australia, and New Zealand. It is a healthy, profitable company. The man who built it opened a 5-cent store in upstate New York in 1879 and paid cash for the tallest building on earth. Most people who shop at Foot Locker have no idea. Here is what the Woolworth story actually teaches. Frank Woolworth invented modern retail. Fixed prices, self-service browsing, scale purchasing passed to the customer as low prices. Every retail company you shop at today, Walmart, Target, Amazon in its own way, is operating on the logic Frank Woolworth figured out in Lancaster, Pennsylvania in 1879. The student who taught the class failed to keep up with what the class became. Woolworths didn't die because its ideas were wrong. It died because it couldn't execute them as well as the companies that had learned from it. When Walmart out-Woolworthed Woolworths, there was nothing left to sell. The lunch counter is in the Smithsonian now. The stores are Foot Lockers. And somewhere, a 27-year-old store clerk from upstate New York is probably still right about everything. We'll see you out there. The road goes on.